Amina and Jide had always noticed their friends wearing contact lenses. Every time they saw them at school or at gatherings, their friends' eyes seemed brighter, sharper, and more confident. It was not just about the look, it was the way they carried themselves, the way their smiles seemed to glow. Amina often wondered if it would make her feel the same way. Jide too had been curious. He wanted to feel different, more confident, and maybe a little adventurous. One afternoon after school, the two friends sat under a tree near the market, talking about how they could try it themselves. "I saw a store online selling them," Jide said, showing Amina the phone screen. The page had colorful pictures of clear and colored lenses, neatly packed in small plastic cases. "We could order a pair and try them at home. No one has to know until we're ready." Amina's eyes sparkled. "Do you think it will really make a difference?" she asked. Her fingers fidgeted nervously as she imagined herself wearing the lenses, staring at her reflection, and seeing her eyes look completely different. "I mean, it would be amazing. Just for fun." They both laughed. The idea of changing their appearance in a small but noticeable way felt thrilling. They didn't think much about the instructions on the package, the warnings, or the importance of hygiene. Their minds were full of excitement and curiosity. They were young, and the idea of experimenting felt like an adventure. Holding the small lens case in their hands, they imagined the moment they would place the lenses in their eyes and look at each other's reflections. "Okay," Jide said, his voice low with excitement. "Let's do it. What's the worst that can happen?" Amina smiled nervously, feeling a mix of thrill and fear. "I don't know, but I guess we'll find out soon." She held the small case carefully, turning it over in her hands. The plastic felt smooth and lightweight, almost unimportant, yet inside it were tiny lenses that would change how they looked, and potentially how they felt. They decided to place the order online immediately. The shipping was fast, and within a few days a small package arrived at Amina's house. She opened it carefully, revealing two small cases, each holding a pair of lenses, along with a tiny bottle of solution. A pamphlet of instructions was included, but in their excitement they barely glanced at it. "It says something about hygiene, but we'll be careful enough," Jide said, laughing nervously. Amina nodded. "Yeah, we'll be careful. It's just lenses. How hard can it be?" That evening the two friends sat together in Amina's room. The sunlight from the window fell softly on the floor, and the room smelled faintly of flowers from the garden outside. They placed the lenses on the table in front of them. Amina picked one up carefully, feeling its tiny weight between her fingertips. It was delicate, like holding a tiny drop of water. Her heart raced. "I'm nervous," she admitted, biting her lip. "What if it hurts?" Jide shrugged, though he too felt the flutter of anxiety in his chest. "We'll see. I think it'll be fine. Just a little weird at first, maybe?" He picked up his own lens and stared at it. The thought of putting something so small and fragile into his eye made him pause for a moment. Yet curiosity and excitement were stronger than hesitation. They laughed nervously, trying to shake off the tension. "Imagine how cool we'll look," Amina said, her voice full of hope. "Everyone will notice the change. It'll be like magic." Jide nodded, smiling. "Yeah, it'll be like a new me. A cooler me." Neither of them noticed the tiny warning words printed in small letters on the pamphlet. They ignored the advice about washing hands thoroughly, cleaning the lenses, and not wearing them for too long on the first try. They didn't consider the importance of checking for damage to the lenses or the risks of infections. Their minds were full of excitement and anticipation, imagining the moment they would see the world through new eyes. As the evening went on, Amina and Jide carefully prepared to insert their lenses. Amina washed her hands quickly but not thoroughly. Jide did the same. Their movements were careful but rushed, driven by excitement rather than caution. They looked at each other, trying to encourage bravery. "Okay," Amina said, "let's do this together." Jide nodded, smiling weakly. "Ready when you are." Amina picked up the first lens, held it close to her eye, and blinked rapidly to adjust. The moment the lens touched her eye, a strange sensation passed over her. It was unusual, slightly uncomfortable but not painful. She blinked a few times and gasped softly as her vision changed. Colors seemed brighter, shapes clearer, and her reflection in the mirror looked different. She touched her cheek and looked at her eyes, amazed. Jide followed, placing his lens carefully in his eye. He blinked a few times and his vision sharpened. He could see every detail in the room more clearly than ever before. "Wow," he breathed, his voice low. "It's amazing." Both of them laughed, full of relief and excitement. The initial nervousness faded, replaced by wonder. They looked at each other's reflections, noticing the subtle difference that made their eyes appear more vivid and expressive. It felt like a new world had opened for them, one where their appearance matched the image they had imagined. They continued to admire themselves in the mirror, turning their heads to see how the lenses looked from different angles. Their excitement grew. "I can't believe how real it looks," Amina said, grinning. "It's like magic." Jide laughed. "Yeah, like a small change, but it makes a huge difference. I feel different already." They spent hours trying out different expressions, checking each other's eyes, and laughing at the subtle changes. Every glance in the mirror brought a new thrill. The small, delicate lenses had given them a sense of transformation that was almost overwhelming. But as night approached, neither Amina nor Jide realized that the excitement that had driven them to try the lenses so quickly could also lead to problems. The initial thrill blinded them to small warnings: a tiny itch, a slight redness, or the need for proper care. They were too caught up in their curiosity and joy to notice that the lenses, while magical in appearance, required responsibility. Even as they went to bed that night, they felt like new people, unaware that the real lessons of using contact lenses were only beginning. The thrill of change had captured them completely, and the consequences of haste, carelessness, and ignorance were still hidden, waiting silently for the moment they would realize how important caution truly was. And so, in the quiet of Amina's room with the moonlight streaming through the window, the two friends drifted to sleep. Their eyes rested comfortably behind the lenses, their hearts full of excitement, and their minds unaware that the adventure of beauty and curiosity had only just begun. That evening, the room was quiet except for the faint sound of the wind brushing against the window. Amina and Jide sat on the edge of Amina's bed, staring at the small lens cases in front of them. The excitement from the previous day was still fresh in their minds. Their fingers trembled slightly as they picked up the tiny, fragile lenses. They had imagined this moment for days: the thrill of seeing the world differently, the chance to experience something new, and the fun of sharing it with each other. Amina washed her hands quickly, rubbing them together and splashing water on her fingers. She glanced at the instruction pamphlet but barely read the words. In her excitement, she thought the steps were too simple to worry about. She lifted the first lens, cupping it carefully between her fingers, and positioned it in front of her eye. "Okay, here goes," she whispered, trying to calm herself. Her heart beat quickly as she slowly placed the lens on her eye. It felt strange, slightly wet, and almost ticklish at first. She blinked a few times and suddenly the world sharpened. Colors seemed brighter, details more defined, and even the patterns on her bedsheets appeared clearer than before. Amina gasped softly, her eyes wide in amazement. Jide watched her carefully, a mixture of curiosity and anticipation in his gaze. "Wow, it really works," he said, his voice low. He picked up his lens, holding it carefully between thumb and finger. "Let me try mine." He positioned the lens in front of his eye and placed it gently on the surface. The moment it settled, his vision became sharper, and he leaned forward to examine his reflection in the mirror. His eyes seemed brighter, almost sparkling, and he grinned widely. "This is amazing," he said, laughing quietly. "It really does make a difference." For a few minutes, the two friends admired themselves in the mirror, turning their heads from side to side, blinking and adjusting the lenses. They experimented with expressions, noticing how their eyes changed the look of their face. Every glance brought a thrill of excitement. The small lenses had transformed their appearance in a subtle but powerful way, giving them a new confidence they had not felt before. But after a short while, Amina felt a faint itch in her eye. It was mild, almost easy to ignore, but it made her blink repeatedly. She assumed it was normal for a first-time wearer and continued to admire herself. "It's probably nothing," she said softly, trying to reassure herself. Jide, meanwhile, felt a small burning sensation in his eyes. He blinked rapidly, hoping it would pass. But soon, his eyes began to water slightly. He wiped them with the back of his hand and laughed nervously. "Maybe it's just because we're new to this," he said. "Our eyes aren't used to lenses yet." Their excitement masked the warning signs that their eyes were giving them. The itch, the slight redness, and the watery sensation were subtle but important signals that their eyes were adjusting to something foreign. Amina and Jide, caught up in the thrill of their new appearance, ignored these signals. They were more focused on how cool and different they looked, on the fun of sharing this first experience together. For the next few hours, they continued to explore the effects of the lenses. They moved around the room, testing their vision, looking at colors, shapes, and patterns in ways they had never noticed before. Every object seemed sharper, brighter, and more detailed. They laughed at the small things: the way the candlelight reflected in the glass bottle on the table, the patterns on the curtains, the texture of the carpet. Everything felt heightened, almost magical. Amina even showed Jide how her eyes appeared in different lighting. She tilted her head under the light from the lamp, blinking slowly and smiling. "Look at this," she said, "it's like a tiny magic trick." Jide laughed, impressed by the subtle change. "Yeah, it really does make us look different," he agreed, leaning closer to see his own reflection. As the night went on, the initial thrill began to compete with growing discomfort. Amina's itch became more persistent, making her blink frequently. The small irritation started to feel like a tiny sting each time she blinked. She tried to adjust the lens, gently moving it with her finger, but the sensation lingered. "It's weird," she admitted, frowning slightly. "I didn't expect it to feel like this." Jide's eyes continued to water, making it difficult for him to see clearly at times. He rubbed his eyes gently, trying to remove the discomfort, but it only seemed to increase. "Maybe we should take them out for a bit," he suggested, hesitating. But Amina shook her head, still captivated by the transformation in her eyes. "No, let's give it some time," she said. "It might just be our eyes getting used to it." Neither of them realized that these minor irritations were early warning signs of improper use. They had not washed their hands thoroughly, they had not ensured the lenses were perfectly clean, and they were wearing them for longer than recommended. In their excitement, they had overlooked the importance of careful hygiene and proper care. Hours passed and the discomfort grew slightly. Amina's eyes were redder now, and she could feel a small burning sensation along with the itch. Jide's vision blurred occasionally as his eyes continued to water. But still, they hesitated to remove the lenses, eager to experience the full effect of their new appearance. They were caught in the thrill of curiosity, not realizing that their eyes were struggling silently. Eventually, they noticed that their reflections in the mirror had changed subtly. The brightness of their eyes seemed less sharp, and the redness in their eyes contrasted with the smooth, youthful look the lenses had given them. It was a small warning, but they were too focused on excitement to take it seriously. "We just need to adjust," Amina said softly, blinking rapidly. "I'm sure it's normal. It's only our first time." Jide nodded, though he was starting to feel uneasy. "Yeah, maybe we should blink more and let them settle." They continued to watch each other's eyes, adjusting the lenses slightly, and laughing nervously at how they looked. The thrill of change still outweighed their worry, though the tiny warnings were starting to add up. By late evening, the discomfort began to interfere with their vision. Amina noticed a faint blur when she looked at objects far away, and Jide found himself squinting to focus. They exchanged worried glances, realizing that something might not be entirely right. But the thought of removing the lenses and losing the exciting new look made them hesitate. They were young, curious, and caught up in the moment, unwilling to face the possibility that their excitement could have consequences. Finally, they decided to take a short break, removing the lenses for just a few minutes to rest their eyes. As soon as they did, the immediate relief was noticeable. The redness and irritation began to calm, and the sting disappeared. They breathed a sigh of relief and promised to be more careful next time. "We'll adjust slowly tomorrow," Amina said, smiling weakly. "No more rushing." Jide nodded. "Yeah, lesson learned. But wow, I didn't expect it to feel so strange and so amazing at the same time." They both laughed softly, sharing the mix of excitement and slight fear that made the experience unforgettable. Even as they prepared to go to bed, they could not stop thinking about the change. The next morning, Amina woke with a heavy feeling in her eyes. When she opened them, the brightness of the room seemed almost too harsh. Her eyes were red and scratchy, a burning discomfort that made her blink repeatedly. She felt a dull ache behind her eyes, like something was pressing against them from the inside. She reached up, rubbing her eyelids gently, hoping it would help, but it only made the irritation worse. Jide, who had been asleep on the other side of the room, sat up slowly. His eyes felt strange too, dry in some areas and watery in others. When he tried to focus on the small alarm clock on the nightstand, the numbers appeared blurry and fuzzy. He blinked several times, thinking it might just be the morning fog in his vision. But when he rubbed his eyes and looked again, the blur remained. "Good morning," Amina said softly, her voice tinged with worry. She moved closer to the mirror to examine her eyes. The redness was more obvious in the daylight. "Oh, Jide, look at my eyes. They're really red. And itchy. This doesn't feel right." Jide got up and walked to the mirror beside her. His reflection showed watery eyes, small red veins, and a subtle shadow around the eyelids. He reached up, touching his eyes cautiously. "Mine aren't as bad," he said slowly, "but my vision, it's a little blurry. I don't know why. Maybe we wore them too long last night?" Amina nodded, frowning. "We didn't even follow the instructions properly. We rushed and our hands weren't really clean. Maybe that's why this is happening. They both sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling the first twinges of fear that their experiment might have consequences. The thrill and excitement from the night before had faded, replaced by the discomfort that made simple movements painful. Every blink reminded them that something was wrong. I guess it's not just about looking cool, Jide said quietly. There's more to wearing these lenses than I thought. His voice was low, almost hesitant, as he realized they had ignored warnings and hygiene steps. Amina rubbed her eyes again and sighed. We need to be careful. This is worse than I imagined. I thought it was just a small change, but our eyes are sensitive. I think we messed up. They decided to continue their day trying to go to school despite the discomfort. They packed their school bags, got dressed, and walked to the bus stop, hiding the strain in their eyes behind smiles. But every movement was uncomfortable. Amina's eyes itched constantly, and Jide squinted to see the street signs clearly. They tried to focus on the conversation around them, but the fatigue in their eyes made it hard to pay attention. Once at school, the irritation became more obvious. Amina found herself blinking more than usual, trying to soothe the scratchy feeling. Jide kept rubbing his eyes under the desk, hoping no one would notice. Their friends greeted them as usual, but Amina and Jide were distracted, noticing only the discomfort and the faint sting in their eyes. During class, Amina noticed that the words on the board seemed slightly blurry at times. She squinted to read them, leaning forward, but her eyes quickly tired. The red veins in her eyes seemed to stand out even more under the fluorescent lights, and a dull ache persisted behind her eyes. She realized that this was more serious than she had thought. Jide, sitting beside her, tried to focus on his notebook, but the lines of his writing seemed to blur as he moved his pen. He rubbed his eyes, feeling a small pinch of fear growing inside him. This isn't normal, he whispered to Amina during a short break. I think we need to stop wearing them for a while. Amina nodded, biting her lip. Yeah, I think you're right. But we didn't think it could get this bad. I thought a few hours wouldn't matter. She looked around the classroom, noticing other students staring at them. They must have noticed her red eyes, though no one said anything. She felt a little embarrassed, realizing that their excitement had blinded them to safety. By lunchtime, the discomfort had worsened. Amina's eyelids were slightly swollen, and Jide's eyes watered continuously. They both realized that their experiment, which had started as a fun idea, was now turning into a lesson in caution. They tried to eat quietly, but the burning and itching distracted them from the conversation and the food. Maybe we really need to read the instructions properly this time, Jide said quietly, his tone serious. I think we skipped too many important steps yesterday. Amina nodded, her eyes watering as she blinked repeatedly. Yeah, washing hands, cleaning the lenses, even the solution. We ignored all of that because we were so excited. I guess it was too much, too fast. After school, they walked home slowly, each step reminding them that their eyes were not okay. The bright sunlight made Amina squint and shield her eyes with her hand. Jide tilted his head, trying to avoid the harsh light, but even shadows seemed uncomfortable. They realized that their vision, while improved temporarily by the lenses, was now compromised by improper care. At home, they decided to remove the lenses immediately. Amina's hands shook slightly as she handled the small lenses, careful not to touch her eyes too roughly. When the lenses were finally out, she felt immediate relief, though the redness and irritation remained. Jide followed, carefully removing his own lenses and placing them in the solution. Sitting together on the sofa, they both breathed deeply, relieved to be free from the direct contact of the lenses. I didn't think it could get this bad so quickly, Amina admitted. It feels like we hurt our eyes without realizing it. Jide nodded. I think this is a big lesson for us, he said. Excitement and curiosity are fun, but our health matters more. We can't just rush into something without thinking about the consequences. They spent the next hour reading the pamphlet properly, noting every warning and step they had ignored. Washing hands before touching the lenses, cleaning the lenses with proper solution, not wearing them for too long, replacing them regularly, and consulting an eye professional if irritation occurred. Everything they had skipped seemed crucial now. Amina felt a wave of guilt. We could have caused an infection, she said softly. I mean, our eyes are lucky it didn't get worse. This could have been really serious. Jide shivered slightly at the thought. Yeah, it's scary. I didn't realize how delicate eyes are. We were too careless and it almost cost us more than just comfort. They both sat quietly, reflecting on their actions. The excitement of the first wear had blinded them to caution, and now they understood the price of ignoring safety. Their eyes felt tired, the redness gradually fading but leaving a lingering ache. They realized that proper hygiene and careful use were not optional, they were essential for anything that touched the eyes. That evening they promised each other that they would never repeat the same mistakes. The lenses would be used only after thorough cleaning, hand washing, and careful handling. They had learned that the thrill of trying something new was not worth the risk of injury or infection. The discomfort and fear of losing clear vision had impressed the importance of responsibility upon them. Even as they went to bed that night, their eyes were still slightly red and itchy, but they felt wiser. The lesson had been immediate, clear, and unforgettable. They had discovered that excitement without caution could turn an adventure into a risk. After the uncomfortable day at school, Amina and Jide sat quietly in Amina's room, still recovering from the irritation in their eyes. The redness had faded slightly, but the sting and discomfort reminded them that something had gone wrong. They stared at the small contact lenses on the table, feeling a mix of guilt and worry. Both had thought that wearing lenses would be a fun adventure, a harmless way to look different, but now they realized they might have underestimated the risks. Amina picked up her phone and opened the web browser. "Maybe we should read more about it," she said quietly. "I mean, we need to know if what happened today is normal or if it's serious." Jide leaned over her shoulder, peering at the screen. The first few articles were simple guides on contact lens safety, but as they scrolled down, the warnings became clearer and more frightening. Improper lens use could cause eye infections, corneal scratches, and even temporary or long-term vision problems. Some articles talked about people who had to wear glasses permanently after neglecting hygiene. Amina felt her stomach tighten. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a paragraph. "It says that even small mistakes, like not washing hands before touching the lenses, wearing them too long, or using old solution, can cause serious damage." She swallowed nervously. "We did all of that yesterday." Jide's eyes widened. "So, the redness, the itch, and the blurry vision, it wasn't just normal first-time discomfort. We could have made it worse." His voice trembled slightly, and for the first time the thrill of wearing lenses seemed foolish. "We thought it was just fun. We didn't think it could be dangerous," he admitted quietly. Amina nodded, her fingers fidgeting nervously with the edge of her sleeve. "I know. I feel guilty. We ignored all the safety steps just because we were excited. I didn't even think about the risks. I just wanted to try them and look different." They both sat in silence for a few moments, letting the weight of the realization settle in. Their excitement had blinded them to the responsibilities that came with contact lenses. They had rushed, ignored instructions, and underestimated the importance of hygiene and care. And now, they understood that even small mistakes could have serious consequences for their eyes. "I guess we never realized that our eyes are really delicate," Jide said, breaking the silence. "We can't just treat them like normal objects. They're sensitive, and if we aren't careful, we could end up hurting ourselves." Amina's voice was soft but serious. "It's not just about looking good or being stylish. Our health is more important than appearance. I think we forgot that for a while." She picked up one of the lenses and held it carefully. "Something so small can make a big difference, not just in how we look but in our vision and safety." They continued to read more articles, learning about the proper way to wear lenses. Wash hands thoroughly before touching them, always use clean solution, never wear them longer than recommended, replace them on time, and consult an eye doctor if irritation occurs. They realized that every small step they had skipped was meant to protect their eyes from serious harm. "This makes so much sense now," Jide said, rubbing his eyes gently. "We were careless and it could have ended badly. I never thought something so simple could be so risky." Amina nodded. "Yeah. I guess shortcuts aren't always worth it. We wanted something quick, cool eyes, new looks, but the cost could have been huge. We almost paid for our curiosity with our health." She shivered slightly, thinking about how close they had come to real trouble. They shared their fears and feelings with each other, both realizing that the excitement of yesterday had clouded their judgment. The thrill of transformation, of looking different, had been strong, but it was no match for the importance of safety and responsibility. "We need to promise each other," Jide said finally, looking at Amina seriously. "No more rushing into things without knowing the risks. No more ignoring instructions. Our health comes first." Amina smiled weakly, still feeling guilty but relieved that Jide understood too. "I promise," she said. "We'll be careful from now on. We'll read the instructions, follow the hygiene steps, and if anything feels wrong, we'll stop immediately." They decided to do a thorough check of their eyes before trying the lenses again. Amina noticed that her vision was clearing gradually, but the redness and itch reminded her to be more cautious. Jide's eyes, though less irritated, still felt strained. They understood that recovery would take time, and that rushing into wearing lenses again could worsen the situation. Over the next hour they carefully discussed all the things they had learned. Proper handling, cleaning, and storage of lenses were essential. Not overusing them, avoiding water contact, and consulting an eye professional if discomfort occurred were rules they had ignored but now respected deeply. The excitement of appearance was not worth risking their eyesight. Amina felt a sense of responsibility she had not had before. "I think this is a good lesson," she said thoughtfully. "We were lucky that nothing serious happened. But we've learned what can go wrong. That knowledge is more important than just trying to look cool." Jide nodded, his expression serious. "Yeah, I feel the same. I don't want to take shortcuts anymore. It's not worth the risk. Our eyes are too important." They reflected on how easy it had been to ignore warnings, to rush into something new without thinking. Their curiosity had been natural, but without care, it had nearly caused real harm. They understood now that every small precaution mattered, and skipping steps could lead to consequences they had never imagined. Amina's gaze softened as she looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes, though still slightly red, reminded her of the lesson she had learned. "We thought this was just fun," she said quietly. "But it's really about responsibility. About respecting ourselves and our bodies. That's the real magic, taking care of ourselves, not just changing how we look." Jide smiled faintly. "I think we've grown a little today," he said. "We learned that excitement is fun, but it has to be balanced with care. We can still enjoy the lenses, but safely this time." They spent the rest of the evening planning how to use the lenses properly. They made a checklist. Wash hands first, clean the lenses carefully, use fresh solution, check for damage, and remove them immediately if discomfort occurred. Each step felt important, a small but powerful promise to their own health. "I feel better knowing we understand this now," Amina said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "We almost learned the hard way, but at least we can fix it. We can be safe and still enjoy the experience." Jide nodded in agreement. "Exactly. It's not just about fun or appearance anymore. It's about being smart and responsible. That's what makes this worthwhile." They both smiled, relieved that they had taken the time to research and understand the risks. The excitement of curiosity had transformed into a thoughtful awareness. They knew now that shortcuts and careless fun could quickly turn into serious problems, but careful attention and respect for their eyes would keep them safe. As the night grew quieter, Amina and Jide reflected on the day's lesson. After the frightening experience and the discovery of the risks online, Amina and Jide knew there was no time to waste. Their eyes still felt slightly tired, but the redness and sting were beginning to fade. They carefully reached for the small contact lenses, holding them gently over the sink. Both were nervous yet determined. This time there would be no shortcuts, no rushing, and no ignoring of safety rules. Amina washed her hands thoroughly with soap and warm water, rubbing between her fingers and under her nails for several minutes. She rinsed and dried them with a clean towel. Jide followed, doing the same, making sure every step was done correctly. They had learned that even the tiniest germs on unwashed hands could cause infections, so they took extra care. Once their hands were clean, Amina picked up the lenses and inspected them closely. She checked for scratches, dirt, or damage, remembering that even a small flaw could cause serious problems for the eye. Jide did the same with his lenses. Both of them were surprised at how small and delicate the lenses were, and how careful handling could make a huge difference. "I can't believe how tiny these are," Amina said quietly. "It's amazing, but it also makes me realize how easily something could go wrong." Jide nodded. "Yeah, we didn't think about that before. Last time we were too excited to even notice the warnings. Now it feels serious." They carefully rinsed the lenses in fresh solution, making sure every surface was clean. They followed each step from the instructions. Inspect, rinse, handle gently, and never touch with dirty fingers. The process, which had once felt boring and unnecessary, now seemed essential. It was the difference between enjoying the lenses safely and risking real harm. When it came time to put the lenses in their eyes again, they both approached the task cautiously. Amina held the lens on her fingertip, looked in the mirror, and slowly placed it on her eye. The initial tickle of moisture was still there, but this time it was different. She felt in control and confident, knowing she had done everything right. Jide followed her example, carefully positioning the lens on his eye, blinking slowly to adjust. The transformation was immediate and familiar. Colors were sharper, shapes clearer, and the reflection in the mirror showed eyes that seemed alive and bright. But this time, the excitement was tempered with responsibility. They appreciated the effect more deeply because they knew the care it took to achieve it safely. After a while, they removed the lenses and stored them in fresh solution, carefully sealing the case. It's amazing how different it feels when we do everything right, Jide said. I didn't even think it would make such a difference in comfort. Amina nodded. Yeah, we learned the hard way. But I'm glad we know now. This feels safer and it actually makes me enjoy the lenses more. They decided that their experience could be a lesson for others. The next day at school, they quietly shared what had happened with their close friends. We tried contact lenses without being careful, Amina began, her voice serious. Our eyes got red, itchy and blurry. It could have been worse. You have to follow every step of hygiene and care. Don't skip washing hands or cleaning the lenses. And never wear them for too long the first time. Jide added, we thought it was just for fun, but it's really about safety. Taking shortcuts can hurt your eyes. It's not worth it. Their friends listened carefully, some nodding in surprise. None of them had realized how important hygiene and careful handling were for contact lenses. Amina and Jide's story became a small but powerful warning, reminding everyone that convenience and appearance should never come at the cost of health. After school, the two friends reflected on the lessons they had learned. The experience had started as a simple curiosity, a desire to look different and stylish, but it had turned into a life lesson. They understood now that every action, even something as small as wearing contact lenses, carried responsibility. It's funny, Amina said, we thought beauty and convenience were what mattered. But now I see it's about respect for ourselves, for our health. That's more important than looking different. Jide smiled. Exactly. The excitement is fun, but we learned that some things, like our eyes, require careful attention. We can enjoy it but safely. Over the next few weeks, they followed every rule they had learned. Each time they used the lenses, they washed their hands carefully, rinsed the lenses properly, and never wore them for too long. They noticed a difference in comfort, vision, and confidence. They felt proud of themselves for taking responsibility and understanding the importance of care. Their parents also noticed the change. They were pleased to see that Amina and Jide had learned responsibility and caution. It's good you two understand this, Amina's mother said. Taking care of your eyes is very important. You're lucky nothing serious happened. Yes, Jide added. We were careless at first, but now we know better. It's a lesson we'll never forget. The story of their first experience became a personal reminder of the balance between curiosity and caution. Every time they picked up the lens case, they remembered the discomfort, the redness, and the worry from that first night. Those memories reinforced the importance of responsibility and careful attention. Even their friends benefited from the lesson. Many of them began to follow the hygiene rules more carefully when wearing lenses. Amina and Jide's story spread quietly through their circle, helping others avoid the same mistakes. They had turned a moment of danger into a teaching moment, proving that lessons learned the hard way could help many people. One evening, as the sun set and the room filled with soft orange light, Amina and Jide sat together, placing their lenses in for a short, careful practice. They looked at each other in the mirror, blinking slowly and adjusting. The thrill of new vision was still there, but now it came with calm and confidence. They had learned that patience, hygiene, and respect for their eyes were more important than rushing or looking cool. Amina smiled at her reflection. We were lucky, she said softly. This could have gone badly, but we made it through and learned something important. Jide nodded. Yeah, and now we can enjoy it safely. That's the real lesson, being responsible and thinking before acting. They stored the lenses in clean solution, sealing the case carefully. They had turned curiosity and excitement into understanding and responsibility. Every step was deliberate, careful, and thoughtful. The small changes in their eyes were no longer just about appearance. They were about learning, growth, and respect for themselves. From that day on, Amina and Jide became known among friends for their careful and safe approach to contact lenses. They continued to enjoy the lenses, but always with the knowledge and respect that came from their experience. The incident had transformed their curiosity into a lifelong lesson about responsibility, care, and the importance of thinking before acting. Even in simple daily life, they carried the memory of that first night, the excitement, the discomfort, the lessons learned. Every time they shared their story with someone new, they reminded themselves of the importance of health over convenience and care over shortcuts. The youthful curiosity that had led them to experiment with lenses had now become wisdom. They had discovered the thrill of change, the importance of safety, and the power of responsibility. They understood that excitement and fun were valuable, but only when balanced with caution and care. And so, Amina and Jide continued their daily lives, their eyes clear, healthy, and bright. They wore lenses with pride, but always with respect for the rules that protected their vision. They had learned that beauty and convenience were not worth harming themselves, and that the real reward was knowledge, responsibility, and safety. The small adventure with the lenses had ended, but the lesson remained, a constant reminder to be careful, thoughtful, and responsible. Their youthful experiment had taught them more than just a change in appearance. It had taught them a lifelong principle. Amina looked at Jide and smiled. "We'll never forget this, right?" Jide laughed softly. "Never. This lesson is with us forever." And with that, they carefully placed the lenses away, closing the case, ready to continue their lives with clearer vision, wiser hearts, and an important lesson learned.